Yeah, we're live. It is 7:17. Tonight I've got a couple things to talk about. One, I want to get into an interesting comment that I got today about ported heads versus unported heads and big cams versus little cams. But before we get into that, I wanted to give you guys an update on the 4.3 liter V6 stuff. So I thought that the aluminum heads that I got for that, and thank you to the gentleman who's was nice enough to send that stuff out. I thought that for some reason, I thought that they were GM heads. I thought that they were a GM version of the aluminum head that they offered for some reason, but they're not. They're VORTECH heads, which it doesn't matter to me. I'm good either way. But what I did was the machine shop was nice enough to pick that stuff up because they were down at WASTEGATES, and Derek took them back from L&R and took them back to the shop and disassembled them. And what I wanted him to do is since I know nothing about the heads, I wanted him to go through them and just let me know, are they sealed up? Like, what is the spring package that's on there? I kind of want to know now. I want to know the valve sizes. Are they as CATHs? Have they been ported? Did they, what is it going to take to make them into heads that we can hopefully run and be successful with? So as it turns out, they were not sealed up. There were a couple of things with the heads. One is one head had valve springs and keepers and retainers. The other one did not. It did have valves. So we're going to have to do I'm going to have to get another set of valve springs for them. And maybe something to match what's there, maybe a whole new set for both of them. Either way, it's not a big deal. The one thing that is different, and Derek was going to let me know, I think that the valves are in it are taller than stock, so they have a higher installed height, probably because they were running a lot of spring rate and a lot of camshaft in this thing for whatever was these were on before. So they are set up with guide plates and 7/16 rockers. So they were as rocker stands go for a V6, they're heavy duty, I guess. It's not a shaft rocker or anything like that. The other thing, and what they did do was they did a vacuum test on it to see with springs in it, because it makes a difference. And so they swapped a set of springs over to the other heads to test the intake and exhaust valve on the other side. And he said, yeah, they're leaking. They're not totally gone, but they're not perfect. He said so. And I said, well, if you can lap them, that's fine. He said, if they need a valve job, let's do a valve job. Just do whatever we need to do to make that work. And then obviously we'll have to get another. Right now, the springs that's on one of the heads are set up for hydraulic roller stuff. So we got like 150 and depending on what lift we go to, somewhere near 400. So it's set up for a hydraulic roller and a fairly, sizable one. And given the installed height, I think Derek said we have enough room for, 700 or 700 plus lift cams. And I said, okay, well, we're never going to run that. So I said, we just need a spring package on there that would get me to, like, let's say 600 or less. And then with, with spring rates, with, seat and open rates that are comparable to a hydraulic roller. Because the motor that I have is a factory hydraulic roller one. So that shouldn't be a problem. And then we'll put roller rockers on it. And, it's just a set of 1.5 aluminums or whatever. And I don't think there'll be any need to go to a 1.6. I'll look at the specs on the camshafts or the camshaft that I had done that we want to run. I had a custom cam done for it. It's a small base circle cam. We'll just adjust the push rod length with those heads, given that the installed height is probably quite a bit taller than the factory heads that came off of here, like the VORTECH heads. We probably have to run a longer push rod, but we'll just science all that out. We just got to put a head on and mock everything up and then go, oh yeah, it needs to be 100 long or 200 long, however long it is, however long the valves are. That's not a big deal, but it would be cool. And the other thing he's going to check, and they were going to put them in, he said that they were dirty. So he was going to put them in and clean them off, put them in the wash and clean them off. He said, it looks at the very least like the entries have been ported. So they've been port matched. I said, oh man, because the entries did look fairly big to me. And so I'm hoping more of, like, the port match thing, I think is a waste of time, especially if you make it too big. I don't think it does anything if the pinch point's somewhere else and if we don't address what the flow is in other areas, like we don't do a multi-angle valve job, we don't do bowl work, we don't address the short turn, we don't address where the problems are, we don't address the valve shrouding in the chamber and stuff. So, you know, there are other areas that I would spend more time on, or that I would have somebody spend time on if they were porting the heads that have nothing to do with the entry of the port. But once he washes them off, we'll be able to tell, are those ported heads? And then, unfortunately, WASTEC doesn't have a flow bench anymore. So I'd like to flow them, but I might not be able to. Maybe I can find somewhere else to flow them, and we can find out what they flow, and we can kind of get an idea. But it'll be interesting to see. At the very least, I'll measure the chambers and make sure we know what the combustion chambers are. We know what the valve sizes are. Obviously, we'll have the spring rates and stuff, and all of that will be fine. But it will be cool to be able to put that on, because I took also those guys were nice enough to drop off the 471 parts that I have, the housing and stuff, and over to the guys at the blower shop. So shout out to the guys at the blower shop who do awesome work. And we'll have to decide whether or not that what I have can be made into a working 471. If it's not, I'm just going to buy a billet one, because I'm going to run a 471. So either that one's going to happen or another one is going to happen. And so that's going to happen. I have the lower manifold for it. That lower manifold will have to bolt onto those BOVs heads, not onto the VORTECH heads. And so obviously we'll want to do a head swap, which will be an interesting thing anyways. And then running those BOVs heads, I'll also be able to run that smoky manifold. So we'll be able to try that, you know, maybe with some different things. We'll see. But that would be cool. And then I also have the turbo kit to run on that. And you know, we got all sorts of stuff. I still have the Torque Storm Supercharger for that, which is basically just a small block Chevy kit, because the front of that is just a small block Chevy. You know, I'll have to get a few other things for the blower. It's not that, I don't think it's the blower shop. It's a blower drive service. I think it's BDS. I'll verify that. It's the one in Anaheim. I want to make sure that I'm saying the right stuff. Let's see here. Yeah, I think it's BDS. Yeah. Not the blower shop. So I don't want to get those confused. I don't want to get people mad at me. BDS. Yes, they're the guys. They're in Anaheim, right? Yep. BDS. Okay, cool. Lower drive service. And so they'll have all the things I need. I need a tensioner and the adapter to bolt onto the stock damper, and then you just bolt the cog pulleys onto that. But you need the tensioner for that and stuff. So, but all that's, you know, all that's easily worked out. And then I'll have to figure out, I don't know if there's a top with it or not. I have to figure out if I want to run a single like 950 or something, because we have that. WASTEC has that Edelbrock carburetor, so I could see if that's going to work. You could run two on it, but again, we don't need two carburetors for a motor that's going to make, you know, 400 or 500 horsepower or whatever. It's just not. It doesn't need to have a lot. So that's what's going on there. Excuse me. The other thing that I wanted to talk about was I got a comment today that I thought was interesting, because I kind of understand the logic that's going on here. But the comment was, hey, you know, I'm running there's a little bit of confusion. I'm running you know, I've got ported airflow research heads, or cathedral port heads, or trick flow heads, or ported stock heads. And I've got them on a 6-liter, and I've got a Trailblazer SS, and I've got your low buck truck cam, but I'm running these ported heads on it. You know, can I make, you know, they want to make all this big power number. I'm like, well, you're not going to be able to do that. I said, couple things. One, the thing that you have two things there that you need. One, you have a 6-liter, which is good, better than a 5.3 or a 4.8, and you also have ported heads. I said, so those two things, you have the potential to make lots of power if that's what you want. I said, but you're not going to do it with that camshaft. Not that the low buck truck camshaft is a bad camshaft. It's just that it's a 212 camshaft on a 6-liter, and you could throw all the ported heads you want on it, and And it's still not going to do that because it's just not enough cam. It's not going to do what a 220 cam or a 230 cam or a 235 cam, or if you have valve release, a 240 cam. It's not going to do what those cams do because it's not big enough, you know? And so you don't have a situation that can take advantage of what the head flow has to offer. But the interesting thing, and he seemed to understand that, he said, okay, yeah, the rest of the combination needs to be put together to utilize the one great thing that you have. You have ported heads that flow 300 CFM. To be able to take advantage of that, you need a camshaft, and you need probably, in his case, a better intake manifold. The FAST would be better than the Trailblazer SS. The Trailblazer SS is not terrible, but there are better intakes that make more power. The interesting comment that I got today, or question that I got today, was, hey, I have that kind of combination. I have a 6-liter with ported heads on it, but I put this small camshaft in it. Would it be better if I just ran stock heads on this? And so his thinking is that because he has a mild cam, that an unported head is going to better match that camshaft. And so, in fact, that will be our poll for today. Okay. You got to listen up because I may not be able to phrase this properly. Will unported cathedral port LS heads, I'll get rid of part of this. Will unported cathedral port LS heads, if you like 799s, make more power with a small cam than ported heads? So is it possible that when we port the heads and they flow a whole bunch more, that they won't work as well with the smaller cam? So that was his thinking. He's well, you know, I think that the heads are just too much. And so let me know what you guys think, because I told him no, they're not too much. You're not taking advantage of everything that they have to offer, but you're taking advantage of some of what they have to offer. And as long as the ported heads don't flow worse than the as cast heads in the lower lift ranges, you're going to gain. If you have a situation like we have with big cams, little cams, where when you ported the head, now the low lift numbers, and this would be a bad porting job, basically, if the low lift numbers got hurt and only the high lift numbers improved, that's a situation where it could be a wash, or it could potentially lose power. I haven't seen that so much, but that's possible. But when heads are ported correctly, usually you get gains. The gains are greater at higher engine speeds, just like gains are greater from a camshaft at higher engine speeds. And I misspoke there. The gains, the airflow gains, are higher at higher lift ranges on the cylinder head. So when you port them, you get some gain at 50 thousandths, some gain a little bit more, maybe at 100, a little more at 2 and 3 and 4, and you go up and out at 600 or 700 lift, you can get big gains out there because you know, even if you did strict percentages, the numbers are so low down at 50 thousandths and 100 thousandths lift that even if you got a 10% gain there, it's not really a very big number because you're starting out with a small number, and 10% of a small number is going to be less than 10% of a much bigger number. So that's what happens. So, but he couldn't wrap his mind around the fact that, oh, I've made it too big and now it's going to not work and it's going to be sluggish with this smaller cam. And I'm like, no, if the head is done correctly, which there's a lot of good head porting out there, both of the stock heads and the aftermarket heads, trick flow, airflow research, you know, PRCs, whatever. And there's lots of good heads out there. And so if they're done correctly and we don't lose low lift flow, we don't trade low lift flow, I kind of think that there's going to be nothing but just, you know, gain, not the kind of gain that you're going to get when you have lots of displacement and really good intake manifold and compression and a big camshaft and stuff like that. So you could take advantage of the heads, but at least a little bit more. Oregon's in the house. What's going on? Okay, so let's see what you guys got going on. Yeah, I'm excited about the 4.3. Getting stuff together on that. I'm ordering a bunch of parts for it, and so that will be good. And then we're going to be doing some more camshaft testing coming up here before too long too. So let's see what you guys got going on. Mike, Mr. No Name. Okay, it take me a while to break that up when it's all together. Long time viewer, first time chat. Welcome. Get ready, write down all your questions so you can ask all of your questions. Organs in the house, which Brode's heads. The ones that are in the thumbnail are they're probably the little Brodies or something, the little V6 ones. Have you done any test runs on Frankenstein heads? I have never tested them. I don't know that I've ever had a motor. Well, I have had motors way back. Like I had a 468 stroker. I had a 495 stroker. Those kinds of motors could take advantage of what fully ported Frankenstein LS3 or LS7 kind of heads. But I don't know that they were in business back when I did that test. So I haven't run any of their new stuff. Richard, I haven't been tuning in lately. Have you gotten a hold of the BTR Canna valve heads? I've been waiting on those for 2 years now. I haven't tested any, but the guys at BTR have, and now they're available. I don't think that's a thing. Isn't the reason Chevy ran the hot LT1 or Duntov cam to crutch the lack of airflow on the heads? Do you mean back in the day, back in the 60s and very early 70s? The LT1 cam was smaller than the previous DZ302 and the L76 and L84 cams. But what they did have was a lot of duration in them. Not a lot of lift because the heads didn't flow a lot. And also, if you don't run a lot of lift on those and you run a lot of duration, you have fairly stable lobes that are not super aggressive. And so it's easier on springs. Bobby, what's going on? Richard, what do you torque the rods back to? I redo the factory torque sequence. A lot of times on head bolts for the dyno, I just torque them to like 65 foot-pounds. But on the rod bolts, I just redo the torque sequence, which is 15. And then depending on whether it's a Gen 4 or Gen 3 or Gen 4, then the next step is an angle torque rotation. And so the Gen 3 is different than the Gen 4, so it's less. Prestige, what's going on? Will unported cathedral port LS heads, think 799, make more power with a small cam than ported heads? About 3/4 to 1/4 in the no variety. Ever tested a Chevy 3.6 liter V6? I have not. I don't ever remember hearing of any aftermarket support for that other than, yeah, we can put a turbo on it and put bigger injectors in it. You can put nitrous on it. I don't know if there are. It would surprise me if they weren't Shorey headers, at least maybe for it. Near. Yeah, I'm curious to see. I'm excited to run really any kind of aluminum heads on there will be great, and then that will allow me to run that carbureted manifold that I've had for years and years and years. And then I've got to get some tall valve covers for that too, for the rocker setup on those. And then I'm hoping that I don't think that the valve covers I'm hoping the valve covers don't interfere with the blower manifold. Because, you know, we got to have some blower manifold. Have you ever used eBay LS7 knockoff lifters? I haven't. We sell LS7 lifters on our store, so they're a pretty good price already. Richard, next time you're on a chassis dyno, can you demonstrate how being in a different gear can affect wheel horsepower if you don't change the dyno setting? Yes, I can have Jimmy run things in different gears. We did that long ago with I think the first time I did it was with Jim Bell. I mean, we noticed it when we were doing testing, whether you test it in second or third or fourth, or if you wanted to do it in fifth gear. And we noticed that when I was doing the Honda stuff too. We were doing Bonneville, but I remember doing it with Jim Bell because he was even getting into the different gear, the changes from the different gear ratios. He was doing Mustang stuff. So if you changed from 373s to 410s or 325s or something, that there would be, you would register a change in power. Looking forward to the 4.3 liter test. I've owned a few. 25% crank underdrive pulley for a cam only LS3 street car. Any personal experience gain worth it? Any street car? I don't see or hear about people doing underdrive pulleys on LSs. I didn't really know that that was a thing. I mean, it's common back in the day for 5-liter Fords and stuff, but I didn't know that LS guys were doing that. The thing that worries me about 25% seems like a lot. And so I would worry about water flow would be the main thing. And then secondarily, alternator charging. Richard, I love how you made 650 with a ported M90 supercharger. Do you think you'll try it on the red truck again? Did you figure out the issue? I don't know what the issue is on the truck. I can't figure out why it didn't do what we kind of expected it to do. I didn't run the ported blower on there. But the reason that we made 650 with the ported blower was not because it was a ported blower, is because we ran it on a 540 horsepower NA motor. Got a 2003 5.3. I want to achieve 800 horsepower. What's my cheapest way to build it? Yeah, you're going to do a cam, springs, injectors, a pump, and a turbo. I have a 4-bolt main, 350. I'm saving for a rainy day. Likely going to make a 383. Just waiting on all the spare money to magically appear. Yeah, I haven't found that to be very successful for me. all of the magic money leprechauns don't seem to like show up like they should. 4-bolt main 350s are good though. They're good to have around. I'm curious about if I make insane low speed torque on my little inline 6 and just gear the heck out of it, will it feel more like a horsepower assault engine? I don't think it'll feel the same. I mean, the guys have been successful doing that. If you look at the Audi Volkswagen Le Mans effort, where they ran their prototype cars with diesel powertrains, and they were fairly successful. And although it was hard on the transmission, so much so that they figured out a way to swap basically the whole back half of the car and do it in, I don't know, 2 or 3 minutes. It was not very much, because the transmissions wouldn't live the 24 hours. Because the diesels made, I mean, even though they were race diesels, they were still fairly low RPM and they had a lot of torque. And then they're trying to use it for a race application. So I don't know that you get it to do the same. I think you could get it to be fun. Would a 4.8 with the BTR torque cam benefit from new valve springs? I would say the consideration for valve springs would be how many miles does your valve spring have on them? How many miles I have on them now? It's kind of like a trunnion upgrade. You know, if like my truck that has 350,000 miles on it, 355,000, doing a trunnion upgrade is not like a performance upgrade. It's probably more like a necessity upgrade. Richard gives off rich guy vibes. Yeah, you must be new here. You wouldn't say that if you saw my 2002 Chevy Silverado with a cracked windshield and no radio, and missing most of the passenger door panel. And instead I have a Harbor Freight strap screwed into the door so that I can open and close it. But yeah, we'll go with your thing. Richard, I have a 2010 Mustang GT that I plan on adding a Paxton Supercharger to in the near future. Okay. 2010. Okay. Is your Is your 2010, is it a Coyote or is that 3-valve? And for cams, for either one of those, I would stay on the mild side. Did you know Bobby Allison designed and utilized an aircraft propeller loaded dyno? What did the propeller have to do with loading? Like, how did they use a propeller to load the dyno? I don't understand. Were they spinning it against air? Was that the load instead of a water brake? Steak for lunch, that's good. Will a 4.8 with sloppy mechanics stage 2 outperform a 5.3 with a truck Norris cam? Same 862 heads. No, I would doubt. You'd have to have a pretty sizable stall converter in the 4.8 for it to beat a 5.3, because the 5.3 is going to have way more torque to begin with. And with a truck Norris cam, if you just compared a truck Norris cam to a sloppy stage 2, a truck Norris has way more torque up until about 5,000 RPM. So I think by the time the sloppy cam gets going, you know, if you wanted to rev it to 7,000 or whatever, I think the race is already over. Are 706 heads worth porting? Yeah, I've ported lots of them. I mean, I haven't ported them. I've had them ported. But guys worry about them cracking. I haven't found that to be a problem with the stuff that we run. What do you think about the first gen? I'm assuming Chevy Cruze 1.4 Ecotec. I like small motors and I like little cars. 2010 still 3-valve. Okay. I want to use them on a LM7. Yeah, that's probably what it came with, right? I mean, that's what mine has. I love the channel. If I wanted to make an engine, how do you recommend doing that? Because I want to run an inline 6 with a Desmo valve spring, and I want to run 110 millimeter bore with a $45 stroke so I can run to 16,000. So you realize that, well, if you're doing a Desmo and you're doing the valve train, that's where the RPM is going to come from. It's not going to come from the minuscule stroke. But I don't know why. I don't know how you've picked. Yeah, I'm curious how you picked all of that stuff, all that combination. Bobby's Dyno used the blade to load the engine and could change pitch, no eddy current or water brake. So they were just using it to spin. They were just spinning the prop, and the air resistance was the load. 463 valve manual. Okay. So now that I have my L83 of the truck Norris cam, ported heads, and ported LT2 intake, you have a ported throttle too. I'm maxed out because of my cam. Yeah, if you have, it kind of depends on what those L83 ported heads flow, but you could put other intake manifolds on there that would make more power up at the top. But yeah, your cam is small, relatively speaking. You can instantly change propeller pitch to simulate a car while pulling out of a corner. Yeah, if he found a way to control the load, and he's doing it with a prop, I just don't see how it generates that much resistance to the motor. Good evening. Just had my car on the dyno. The horsepower is flat from 46 to 64. Is it a sign of not enough air going in or not enough air coming out or both? Small but floored. Well, how much power is it making? And what is the intake? 232, 240. That seems like a 282 comp cam. I think the next video to watch after this is the one David Visor did last year on the LS3 Enforcer. Better heads, less power. I don't understand. I mean, I know David. He's a good guy. What ring gap do I need to run a 76 turbo on my 4.6? You need 6 thousandths per inch of bore. So multiply the bore size, 3.5 0.54 or whatever, a 4.6 is, I can't remember off the top of my head, somewhere near there, times 0.006, and that will tell you. It was used in the old days when the engines weren't making much power. Use an airboat gear reduction box. Okay. And so I see how they could do that for like a sweep run, but how could you do, or were they not doing stationary stuff or something? I mean, that's great. Anything that can be consistent, as long as you can make that part of it consistent and you can make changes to the motor and see changes, that's good. What do you think about a 5.3 Elm 7 with a Solstice AR5 combo? I don't know anything about that transmission. I would think that it would work. I mean, given what I did with my T5 and everybody saying how, you know, made of glass T5s are or whatever, and the Mustangs, I ran a supercharged Mustang for years and years, you know, 85,000 miles worth of years, and running it at the Silver State and top speed events and road racing and all kinds of stuff. And it worked fine. In fact, we took the transmission out of there and used it in our World Challenge car. Horsepower is 250. Intake is an Edelbrock Performer 5-liter. An Edelbrock Performer 5-liter, the EFI manifold, that's why your power is leveled out, because it's a long runner intake manifold. On the port side, it was efficiency versus massive flow, correct? What for? Are you talking about coefficient of discharge? I picked all that stuff because I want to make a sports car that has a motorcycle engine feel like a Honda S2000, and you can give me advice because I'm just getting into it. You're getting into designing an entire motor. I'm not the right guy to ask about that. 3.55. Okay. Also on the port, is the boost involved or just naturally aspirated and laid again, still on daylight savings time? I don't know what you're asking. Are you talking about the coefficient of discharge? They are made of glass in gripped up heavier cars with rough clutch engagement. Yeah, guys that drag race them definitely break them. I mean, I could see that they do that. Because I remember the drag race guys explaining to me, asking me if I've ever punched my stereo. I'm like, what are you talking about? They're like, yeah, when you snap the shifter off. I'm like, you're shifting hard enough to snap your shifter off? I said, no, I can honestly say I've never done that. Nor would I ever do that. And I've shifted my Mustang more in one endurance race than you've shifted in all the drag racing you've done for your whole life. And I've never broken it. But I'm not trying to do what you're doing. Scrolling. Scrolling. So if you have a 232 cam and 5.3 versus your 212 cam, how much torque are you missing out? Would you estimate at 2,500? Well, you can look on my channel and probably see that. I don't know if I have that comparison at 2,500. But you wouldn't be missing out on any at 2,500 if you have a 2,800 stall converter with a 232 cam and a 5.3, like you probably should. And all 212 cams won't make the same torque at 2,500. Some of them make just stock stuff. Some of them make less. But maybe get into engine building. I've always been fascinated by testing stuff. Like I've been the first time that I ran something on the dyno, on a chassis dyno, I remember thinking, oh yeah, I have to do this all the time. I have to, we need to do stuff. We need to test things. And before I did the dyno stuff, I wanted to at least do Vericom stuff, because this was way back in the day. And when I was working for the magazines, they weren't even doing that. I'm like, how do you know that the headers do what they say that they do? I said, we got to know, we got to tell, we got to be able to tell the readers whether or not this stuff works. And then it was just out of necessity for me to learn how to do that so they could get all of my testing done. I wonder why they don't offer a 268H as a 268HR. People love the 268H. Well, what are the specs on the 268H? Because I'll bet that they do offer a hydraulic roller that would be comparable to that. In fact, I was just perusing the Comp Cams catalog today. I was looking at some older stuff. I think that Extreme Energy 268 is I think that's one of Jeff Smith's favorite small block cams. For the small block Fords, I always like the 274 cam. But, you know, Victor 2 Enforcer with shorties, intake, and long tubes will be ordered. Yeah, a 347 especially will need a good intake manifold. So high ram would be really good. The System X is pretty good. I guess a Victor based one, although you're going to lose a bunch of low speed power and mid range power. The RPM 2 is really good. Fun thing to try. Exhaust pulse to create a vacuum effect. Take a wrapping paper tube. Take a wrapping paper tube and blow a hard pulse of air through the tube, and you can feel the vacuum pulse. Yeah, that's how siphons work. But that's not how. That's actually not all of how exhaust scavenging works, though. There are 3 other forms of exhaust scavenging that are not that. It's really fascinating to learn what's going on. Pressure waves passing each other and kind of all sorts of fun stuff. That book that I have is really good. I don't know if I have it up there. I think it's Heinz Hessler is the guy's name. Yeah, this one. If anybody's interested in learning about stuff that's like way beyond this one, Advanced Engine Technology by Heinz Hessler. There is really, really good stuff on almost everything. But for me, the tuned induction systems, manifolds, and exhaust systems are in here, and they talk a lot about the 3 different forms of charge filling, inertial ram, reflected wave, and Helmholtz resonance. And then they talk about the different forms of scavenging and stuff on the exhaust. It's really good. It's way too involved. Like the math part of it's way too involved for me. I'm not that smart, but the theory stuff is really good. Do you like TrickFlow R? I don't like TrickFlow R intake manifolds. I've never had them work well for me. Is it true that big chop is bad for a turbo cam? I love chop because I know you said that the cam that you want and just add boost. Yeah, but you're thinking about the wrong thing. I think you pick the cam for what you want the motor to do naturally aspirated. So I always recommend a smaller cam with a turbo, not because it's a turbo cam, but because if you make more power down low, you'll spool the turbo up much better, much quicker. And so the turbo will come online, for lack of a better phrase, will come online sooner, and then you'll be happier sooner. If you put a big cam in it that has lots of chop, overlap, or whatever, the cam doesn't start working until later. So you lose power down low. So the turbo says, I'm unhappy, not because of overlap or chop or whatever. It's because the motor's not making any power down there. And so the turbo says, look, I rely on power, which creates exhaust energy, which spins the turbo and drives the turbo. And then we have this reciprocal thing where more exhaust energy, more intake flow, more exhaust energy, more intake flow, and everybody's happy. So that's why I normally recommend smaller cams with that. But if you want chop and you want a lazy turbo, you can have that if that's the kind of camshaft you want. 250 wheel horsepower is very low. It is for a 347. Enforcer heads don't have great exhaust flow, and the shorties are hurting a bit, but there's no reason you'd see 250 with aftermarket heads and cam. I agree. I mean, it should be, you should be, even with a 302, getting over 300 at the tire is not that hard. Any plans on doing any testing with a 6.4 Gen 3 Hemi? I don't have any because I don't have one of those motors, but I wrote a book on Hemis, but it was before the 6.4 stuff was out. Example to actually feel the effect. I remember draining a waterbed like that. So they hook a tube up to the waterbed, and then the tube runs to your faucet, and the faucet has a Y nozzle on it, and you turn the faucet on, and water starts going out. When the water starts going out, it draws the water out to start the siphon in the from the water pump or from the waterbed, and then you turn the water nozzle off, and then the waterbed drained. Like that's fantastic. That's science. Trick flow, long runner R isn't a good intake overall. I've never heard of a long runner R intake manifold. The box R is better than the trick flow R, yeah. With stock heads, only the casting flash removed and a high lift stock duration cam. That seemed to make more power, but I don't have actual dyno numbers. Ran good up to red line. It seemed to make more power than what? I don't know what you're comparing it to in your statement. We have to have a relative thing. I'm hoping that's all that's wrong. Yeah, you should, you can measure when the thing's running at wide open throttle, whatever on the dyno, you can measure all the exhaust pipes and go, yeah, they're all hot or they're not. You could do a compression test to make sure that they're all there. I was referring to the 212 low buck truck cam. So if you have a 3000 converter, will it be drivable as a daily driver? I've never had anything with a big converter at all. Yeah, a 2800 to 3000 is still plenty drivable. Jimmy has a 3500 stall, I think, in his Coyote Mustang, but it's a lockup converter. So the thing drives like it doesn't. A lot of people think, and I was guilty of this too. A lot of people think that a high stall converter, the thing just slips until you get there. It's not like that. It's not like a jet boat. You can drive around at low speeds just like you can in a jet boat. And you can drive around at low speeds at lower RPM than whatever the converter is, especially when it's locked up. It just drives around like a stock converter when you're not at wide open throttle. I'm about to put my big cam high compression 5.3 into a chassis now. Nice. Would love to see you test it and get your thoughts on the combo. Big cam high compression stuff. So it has aftermarket pistons in it then? It's called the jet siphon in the fire service. Yep. Richard's 130 here, South Australia. Welcome. Ported heads, I believe, will make more power if the porting is around the valve area rather than opening up the ports. Yeah, just as long as we see a constant gain through the whole lift range with the ported stuff, it's going to be better. Do us what a 5.7 would with a bigger stroke and bore. What does? This is a private consultation. Will unported cathedral port LS heads make more power with a small cam than ported heads? On the 383 Mopar and a few 2.5 engines, I still don't know what you're talking about, though. I still don't know what things you're comparing. Ever used JB Weld to reduce intake port dead spots? I haven't, because I don't do head porting. I've seen it done a lot. And I've seen also that done in tunnel ram intake manifolds with stuffers going, particularly in big block tunnel rams, where they are doing that to make the, I guess what's going on in the plenum area, making it more responsive to jetting and stuff. And I've seen that work. NASCAR did that with 4V Cleveland heads. Yeah, it's not, I've flowed lots of heads that had epoxy in them. Torque converters have a horsepower rating. A torque converter that's 2600 with 300 horsepower input will act more like a 4000 stall with 600 horsepower. Yep, that's true. The more power you put to it, the higher the stall will be. So that's why when a guy puts a turbo on something, all of a sudden his stall speed can go up. Assuming that he's making boost in the stall area, stall RPM range, which may or may not be happening. You know, that's for the off idle torque guys, the 600 RPM torque guys. You know, we know those guys. We know and love those guys. Pfizer's video on AFR LS3 enforcer head, he was talking about a cam that was optimized for a set of stock heads and lost power with AFR heads. So I don't agree with David on that. And I doubt very seriously that he tested that, because I would like to see the dyno results of that. If the AFR heads make more power than the stock heads, I've never seen them not do that with any camshaft. What we will see is milder camshafts will gain less because they're not taking advantage of what those heads have to offer. But I 100% disagree that you make a camshaft that's specific for stock heads that doesn't work with airflow research heads. If you use it in a class where you could not weld on them, yeah, I could see where that would work. I mean, I've seen it work. I've seen guys, but most of the ones I've seen were, I don't know if they were fixing overporting or fixing, you know, an overporting from a CNC program or something. But we have seen those. And I've seen guys in some extreme examples where they raise the port and then fill in the bottom part of it to make the port entry and the whole thing the right size, because you don't want to just open the whole top up. And then so they got to make sure that everything is working, and so that the port is whatever size the intake is and stuff, whatever size that they wanted. But the whole bottom side, like if they raised it a half an inch or 3/4 of an inch or an inch, I don't know how much they can get away with, whatever they raise it, that bottom section's all filled with epoxy. Big tip, you can smooth out JB Weld. Yeah, before it's hardened with spit on your finger. Yeah, just you're lubricating your finger so that it doesn't stick to it. You heard it here first. I don't think that you're the first guy to discover that. But that's a lot of help for people that haven't done any, that haven't played with epoxy. I do it just to make it look good. I'm putting twin 6466s on it. Let's see. You're putting twin 6466s on a high compression big cam 5.3. Okay. I'm curious why you went that direction. Were you just trying to get the thing? Well, you're not going to get the thing spooled up with a big cam, but I'm curious why you did that. Will ported cathedral port LS heads make more power with the small cam than ported heads? I don't think that they will. That's like the, you know, a head not working with some kind of cam and then the cam not working with some kind of heads or whatever. I haven't seen that. When I did the test on the one of the times that people talked to me about this was the cathedral port rec port thing. Oh, that's a cathedral port cam. That's a rec port cam. That's where the whole wrong cam, this is a turbo cam, but that's where the whole wrong cam thing kind of came from. Is that no matter what camshaft I put in, whatever combination I had, it was the wrong one. You don't have a cam that's optimized for that. I said, well, here's what happened when I ran 6 cams through this combination. And the cams behaved like we would expect. The bigger cam made the most power and lost power down low. And the smallest cam, did what it did. And so that's the thing, is that people think that that's a thing. They think that they can make a camshaft that only works or works like with some combination is somehow optimized, that other cams are not going to do that. And I just have never seen that. Would you rather have a cylinder head that flows too much rather than not enough? I don't think there's such thing as too much. I think if you made the port gigantic, then we could start talking, and the valves were gigantic, then we could start talking about things like that. But I think the question becomes not that. I think if we, like when I talk to people about LS3s, well, I want to port my LS3 heads. I'm like, great. You have a Truck Norris cam in your LS3. And you already have cylinder heads that will support 600 horsepower. And you're not making anywhere near that. You're making closer to 500 horsepower because you have a small cam in there. You're not taking advantage of, you're not even just looking at the lift. You're not taking advantage of what that head has to offer. And you're certainly not taking advantage of what that head has to offer with that camshaft in the rest of the motor. And so that should be the discussion, and not having too much cylinder head. Because you don't have too much cylinder head. That's a stock cylinder head. This is a perfect example where we have a 600 horsepower cylinder head on a stock motor with a stock camshaft that's not going to make anywhere near that. But as we start putting camshaft in there, it starts being able to better take advantage of that. But that doesn't mean that head doesn't work. It works fine with a stock cam. We know that because we run lots of those stock ones. NASCAR and V8 Supercar, they chopped the exhaust pads off and bolted on the aluminum exhaust pads that raised the ports a bunch. Oh, on the Clevelands, that was fairly common. And then on the exhaust side, they chopped the whole thing off and raised the exhaust port. And then in NASCAR, they put posts in the heads, all kinds of stuff. Can't wait for the turbo kit, the new turbo for the 6-liter. We should be testing the new turbo for the 6-liter pretty soon here. The 6-liter turbo will be the next thing that I'm certain that comes out. That will be good. There, near. Yeah, I really like that book. It took me a lot to get, like, I haven't read the whole book, obviously, because there's a lot of stuff in there that I don't really care about. But the getting through the area, because the induction system was the thing that I was most excited about. And there's some forced induction stuff in there, I think, too, which is good. That's kind of my jams. But it took me reading through this, I don't know, 25 or 30 times. And every time I did it, I got a little bit more of it. And so, but never worked on any of the math because I don't think that I'm there. I'm building an L33. Nice. That's a good choice. 224, 230. Is that the hydraulic flat tapping cam? And what is that for? Is that for a small block Chevy? Because I know that they make a hydraulic roller 224, 230 cam. It's going to have more. It's going to have more lift than that. What cam would you recommend for a G42 6-liter LS3 heads, 10.7 to 1, 37 to 41 stalled drag car, plus cam or BTR stage 3 turbo? Well, I think you could max out the turbo with either one of those cams. I think it's going to be softer with the on the bottom with the stage 3 turbo cam. The stage 3 turbo cam might make more, or not more, but it would make power at a lower boost level, because I think that cam's bigger than a Truck Plus cam is. Let's see, XE268H. Yeah. Okay. Near. 4 pattern cams? No, we don't want that. So let's see. 224, 230. I got you. Right here. 08 503-8 XR276 224 230. It's a 503 510 on a 112 and not on a 110. So that's a hydraulic roller. And I'm guessing that they have other. Here's another Extreme Marine 224 230 against a 276 503 510 on a 112. The regular Extreme Energy is 502 510 on a 110 224 230. That's an Extreme Energy 276. It's all small block. I think that's what we were talking about. Trying to make 1500. Horse heads are black labeled, small bore, adjustable shafts. That sounds like you're wanting a bigger cam than. Oh no, wait a minute, Mr. Norman. Okay, I got confused there. Okay, so making 1500 horsepower with what size motor is that? 1500 horsepower is just the right turbos. Please convince me to turbo my stock engine. What stock engine is it? A Barra? You definitely should turbo it if it's a Barra. Is 231, 239 your go-to for tests? No. I haven't used that cam for years and years and years. That's a comp 54 459. UTR Red Hot Magic Cam. I've tested that. That wasn't a good cam for the 5.3. It didn't make any more power than the hot rod cam did. And so I wouldn't recommend that for a 5.3. But that cam is good for other stuff because they originally designed that and the hot rod cam when they were doing LS3 testing. My specialty is making perfectly functional cars undrivable. Yeah, that's a good combination. We like that. Look at that. Does main and rod journal size affect power enough to worry about? No. Mopar guys argue the 340 is superior to the 360 because the 340 has 2.5-inch main journals versus 2.8 on the 360. Not in the range where 99% of any of those motors would be running. There's nothing to argue about there. That's the Cleveland and Windsor stuff too, is like that. That's silly people talking about that. They should be way more worried about their lack of good cylinder heads than they should be about their main journal size. Have you ever seen a supercharger driven by a CVT pulley system? Yes, I have. ProCharger had one, X1 or something like that. I don't know if they still have it or not. So they could change and I think that they could computer control the drive speed, which is a kind of a good idea, but I don't know that maybe it was ahead of its time. Windsor block with Cleveland heads. Yeah, aftermarket Cleveland heads would be good. Like CHI 3V stuff is really good. And there are a lot of other Cleveland heads available now. Trickflow makes them and Edelbrock makes them. So they're good. That's good stuff. We got one more minute. 68% saying no, just put the ported heads on. Or actually, the question isn't that. The question is, do you need to put ported heads on when you have a small cam? The answer to that's probably no. I wouldn't recommend people step up to ported heads who are only getting a low buck truck or a truck Norris, chopper copper kind of cam. I wouldn't recommend that they get ported heads because they don't really have the camshaft to take advantage of that. And yeah, it might be a little bit better, but you're not getting the big gains that you would get going from a stock head to a ported head when you have all the other things. You don't have that. And in most cases, guys that have that also have some sort of stock intake manifold too. So the ported heads would just be one thing and it's not enough. And I recommend that you spend money somewhere else. What's your new go-to cam, the 230? I don't have go-to cams. I test hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of cams and just show you guys what they do. Richard, I've heard that Gen 2 570 Eagle heads flow pretty well. Is that true? Yes. Eagle and Apache heads flow really well. Mopar muscle truck guy, the real reason the 340 can be superior to the 360s, it will rev a lot higher before the bottom end breaks from over revving, and you can take advantage of the RPM. What do you mean by it revs higher? For what reason? What's the limitation of the 360? I would argue on both of those motors that the limitation for RPM is valve train and very mediocre head flow for any of the stock heads. When's the next RHP cam coming out from LS1? What cam do you want? If you don't buy cams and springs as a kit, how do you match them? 238, 242, 600, 226, 918. No, those are not the springs that I would put on that. For that camshaft, I would run dual springs, because that's a really big cam. And also you have something other than stock pistons in there, right? Because piston to valve clearance is probably going to be, I don't know what the LSA is on that, but I think stock piston to valve clearance is going to be iffy on that. But yeah, don't run a 26918. Don't run those springs. Those are good springs for milder cams, but not what I would run for that. Need, no, want, yes. 799 heads on an LQ4 with low buck truck cam. Is dynamic compression ratio an issue for 87 octane? No. And I would argue that dynamic compression isn't the thing that makes it detonate anyways. Your timing curve is going to dictate that. It's H2 truck cam, 243 heads, new pistons in the 5.3, and a PTR manifold, long runners, automatic trans, 3400 stall. It's going on the chassis down in the morning. So it's a 5.3 with a stage 2 truck. And is it the, what PTR manifold is it? I don't remember. Is it the adjustable, like high ramish looking one? Customer's car came in the shop, GM 454. It has mismatched large head ports with much smaller intake ports and has an adapter to make it work. The adapter matches to the bottom of the ports. Customer asked if the adapter would be better if it's matched to the top of the ports. I don't know what you mean by an adapter. We have guys run oval ports for a big block, oval port intake manifolds on rec port heads all the time. You just bolt it on there. You just make sure that it doesn't leak, that it seals, it, doesn't have a vacuum leak. And then that's not a problem. It's not ideal, but a lot of the Mercury Marine stuff was factory like that. It's an LS2 stock piston and head, piston to valve. Yeah, piston to valve clearance on a 238 cam at 50, you're definitely going to have to measure that. I would be surprised if it fits. All right, Mike, we'll see you later, man. Have you seen the guys putting Cleveland heads on an LS? Jay Meager from RS Garage had one they built for a Camaro. Yeah, the Ford and the LS have similar bore spacings. They're not identical, but they're similar. But again, I don't know why you'd ever put an iron Cleveland head on an LS. That would be a waste of time. And given what there are available for LS engines, I don't know why you would do that. Other than as a Gee Whiz thing, which is super cool. If dynamic compression isn't causing detonation, what is? Well, what are the other things that affect detonation besides dynamic compression? Air temperature, water temperature, chamber design, piston design, quench, air fuel, and timing. And so all of these other things can cause detonation. And more than likely, if you can't get away with running full timing on a stock combination, you're not going to get away with full timing, especially on 87. Like my truck can't run 29 degrees of timing, which is where it would make peak power on 87 octane running stock. It can't do that. So you're not going to be able to do that if you enhance if you enhance dynamic compression or any one of those things and make it worse. You're not going to be able to do that. So you won't have all of the timing in it. That's what will make it work for you. No leaks, rec ports, but I think you can get adapters that match the intake high or low to the port of the heads. I don't know what you mean by match. Is the intake manifold an oval port head? I mean, designed for an oval port head, and does he have rec port heads on it? Because there's no matching that. There's no need to match that, because the oval port manifold is never going to match a rec port opening, no matter what you do to it. It doesn't matter if you put stuffers or whatever in the port. That's not gonna affect anything. It's still gonna have to get bigger. I know we've done that. We have run rec port intakes, this is the worst way to go. A rec port intake manifold on peanut port heads, and guess what? It still works. I believe the Cleveland heads they used on Ellis block were custom made for the application or made of aluminum, revved to 8,000. Yeah, I mean, that's fine. Like I said, the reason to do that is as a gee whiz thing. That's great. Pretty easy to rev to 8,000 with an LS with any kind of the stock heads. But like I said, just like putting the Cleveland heads or LS heads on the 6-cylinder Ford, that's a great thing where you weld them together. That's really cool. But there'd be no reason to do that. Like there's no performance reason to do that, because we have, it's like what, there are LS heads out there that flow way more than the power that you're going to make. Or they can support that. I mean, look at some of the ported, LS7 heads. The BTR heads, which are nice, but not any kind of race head. And so the race heads are even crazier. I've got one more minute. Did I get rid? Oh, I did get rid of my pole already. It's been really hot here. It says record high there. I saw it was in the 90s today. The snakes are not out. I haven't even gone looking for them. I'd have to go really early in the morning. I'm ready for it to cool off, but I don't think it's going to. Can't find the Cleveland LS stuff anywhere. I think you'd really make the Cleveland guys mad if you put the LS on there. Put the LS heads on the Cleveland. And on that note, it is time to go. Thank you guys all for showing up. I will be back tomorrow.